welcome to a new video. Hopefully the volume is not too terrible. Try to lower the game volume. But anyways, the demo. Anyways, I decided to actually record some commentary over some TF2 gameplay rather than just doing an assortment of highlight videos. And the reason for that is so I can talk about some seemingly random bullshit. I figure it's a lot more interesting than talking over a still image. Yeah, fuck you. So anyways, I think the first thing I want to talk about is politics. Gotta start out strong and controversial, am I right? And so, out of all the Democratic candidates I'd be willing to vote for, which are the only candidates in the party I'm willing to vote for, I'll fucking hold my nose and vote for Biden before even dreaming of voting for Trump. But out of them all, I think the best one is Andrew Yang. And there's a real good reason for that. He's offering 21st century solutions to 21st century problems. Let me start out with a very simple statement that I don't think anyone from any political side would disagree with. Businesses exist to make money. What are you doing? They exist to accumulate as much capital as they can, and that's the bottom line. Now, some people go into businesses or start one because they want to, make a name for themselves or entertain people or whatever. But the core philosophy of business has always been and will always be, we need to make as much money as we can. So let's say you're a business owner and you had the choice between hiring a bunch of human workers or utilizing a single machine that does the exact same job as those human workers. Now, having human workers comes with a myriad of downsides. For example, humans need to eat, they need to sleep, they need to shit and piss, they need to have vacations and oftentimes weekends as federally mandated. They need to be paid. If they're not contract or gig workers or temporary hires, which is like 94% of new jobs these days, they also need to have health insurance. And a human being can get injured on the job and potentially sue you as the employer, or in the absolute best case scenario, they would be indisposed for a while, needing to recover and thus need to be replaced. They might hate the job and thus not give it their all, give it less than 1% of their effort. You can fire them, sure, but you will still need to find a replacement human being. And depending on what the work is, that person will need to be trained or have adequate education, and so on and so forth. Now compare that with a machine that doesn't need to eat, sleep, or excrete. It doesn't need to be paid. It doesn't need vacations or weekends. It doesn't have a family or any hobbies or aspirations outside of doing its supposedly singular task. It doesn't have the capacity to hate its work. It'll work faster, more consistently, and longer than any human being possibly could. And if it's damaged, it's a lot easier to pay for a repairman or get a replacement part or just outright replace the machine than it is to do the same for a human being. Any business that keeps human workers over that machine is going to fail in comparison to the businesses that utilize that machine. It is a direct upgrade in basically every freaking way. And that's the road a lot of businesses are taking now and will be taking in the future as artificial intelligence and automation becomes ever more widespread. And will become more widespread because we aren't suddenly going to use shittier machines to do the work. They're going to get better and better each fucking few years.
3, 2, 1.
Now this poses a major existential threat to the human race because for all of civilization, for the whole history of a bunch of human beings deciding to get together, stay in one place, and basically set up a sort of societal system where we help each other and adhere to certain rules and regulations, we have always worked to live. If you want to eat, you have to have some thing of value, be it iron bars or cattle, or in our latest iteration, paper money and metal coins that reflect wealth and that sort of stuff. And it's been going on for that long because there really was no alternative. If there's work to be done, it needed to be done by people. Now sure, we've made tools and even machines to make some of the work easier, but ultimately it was still people controlling a lot of it. I was kind of hoping we'd have a taunt or whatever. But now, we're entering an age where artificial intelligence is becoming viable, where machines are able to operate on their own. Granted, in a limited capacity. Right now they can do, repetitive, limited amount of work. But again, that's going to become more widespread. Now, the work that machine does in this day and age, here's one real big example. Bank tellers. Those guys who work at a bank, they're behind the counter or whatever, behind the window, and you carry out certain financial transactions with them. Let's say you need to withdraw $100 from your account. You flew far. What do? Do you go into the bank? Do you wait in line? Do you express this need to the teller and then put in your information and all of that, then finally get your $100? Or do you just use an ATM? If you need to transfer money between your accounts, are you gonna mess around with a human being, or are you going to use the faster, more convenient, and instantaneous banking app? For the vast majority of people, it's the latter in both scenarios, because it's just that much more convenient to use a machine than have to utilize a human being. Another thing that has kicked people out of the job are in telephones, actually. Used to be that when you make a call, you have to talk to an operator, state who you want to talk to, and then they patch you through, but now that's done automatically when you just dial in the number. All of those people who would talk to people making calls and patch them through to the right person, out of the job. And there's not a single phone company that's interested in bringing them back, because there's no advantage to them coming back. It would slow things down, it would make things more inconvenient for people trying to make a call. I was very focused, I'm sorry. Technology has provided a far better option than any human being could provide, and that's going to continue. The one everyone's talking about is automatic trucks, self-driving vehicles. We already have autonomous trucks on the road right now in limited capacities, and that's only going to increase. Now, I want you to try to picture in your head the stereotypical truck driver. When I say truck driver, what kind of person comes into mind? I'm going to guess a middle-aged white guy, maybe from the southern area or the midwestern area, who has maybe a high school degree, and that's about it for educational prospect. And you wouldn't be wrong, that is indeed the average truck driver. No derision, but there's a reason they're driving trucks and aren't in Silicon Valley changing the face of science and technology as we know it. Now, what will happen when that person's out of the job? In fact, what will happen if millions of those people are out of the job? Since truck driving is the most common profession in over half of the states in the US. Well, the ability for someone like that to transfer over to a new job is actually exceptionally low. Government programs meant to re-educate people in order for them to gain new employment have like a 13% success rate at best.
Alert. Our control point is being captured.
Well, I just got my shitter shattered. And one of the most common solutions I hear to this ever-growing problem of automation is that we should take the people who are out of the job due to a machine and teach them how to be software engineers and general engineers so they can design some more machines. There's a few problems with that. Let's have the truck drivers back in our minds for a moment. So these truck drivers are supposed to then go to college in their middle ages. They first need to go through all the prerequisites. They have to go through all the prerequisites, which there's quite a bit for college. So they're not even going to be able to start on the road to software development and engineering. They need to go through some basic math. They need to go through some English classes. Depending on the college they're in, they might even have to take some art classes or some sociology bullshit. These people are out of the job because a robot took over their work, and they need to sit around learning fucking gender studies before they can even pick up a wrench. And then when they do finally take the classes relevant to them, there's no guarantee that they'll be able to actually finish the classes. Like I said, no derision, but there's a reason they're truck drivers in the first place. Not everyone is mathematically inclined to be an engineer. Not everyone has a good enough grasp on language to start software development. I sure as shit know I don't know how to do any coding, and I'm probably far more advanced in knowledge of that stuff than any of these truck drivers. It's a fucking uphill battle, and the hill's a 90-degree angle. And they are going to be competing with people who are younger, who are more energetic, who are more determined, who have likely had more experience with technology in general. And if they do graduate after having to learn not only the basics but the forefront of these fields, then again, they're still competing with those young whippersnappers. And 99% of all employers are going to choose the young people over the middle-aged former truck drivers. That's just a fucking guarantee. And they're going to have to do all of this, presumably without a salary, because they don't have a job. The very fucking reason they're going back to college, or going to college for a first time in the first place. It's an absolute mess of an idea. It's something that belongs in fantasy. In fact, if you add wizards and dragons and maybe a little bit of magic, it would actually seem even more grounded in reality. That's how ludicrous the idea is. So what are these people supposed to do if they can't, join them after not being able to beat them? Andrew Yang's proposal, his flagship idea, is called the Freedom Dividend, in which every United States citizen, also good thinking there, Heavy, every United States citizen 18 years or older will get $1,000 a month. And this $1,000 a month will allow for new jobs to be made, because people will no longer be afraid of financial distress, or be so financially insecure that they can't take any risks. And the jobs people do make as a result of this will likely be closer to the skill level the truck drivers need than working on building new machines and developing new software. Get out of here, boy. Now, a lot of people think $1,000 a month is pretty high, and the whole idea is ludicrous. After all, how would Republicans possibly support this? It helps poor people, after all. Well, one interesting thing is that a single state in the US already has a form of universal basic income, Alaska, which is a deep red state, and the UBI in it was implemented by a Republican. The money for their universal basic income comes from oil, as opposed to Yang's proposal to use technology as a driving force. Every Google search, every autonomous truck mile, every purchase on Amazon, a value-added tax at, I think it's like 10%, which is half of what's in Europe, will be implemented, where the company has to pay that, and the money will then go back to the American people. Another interesting thing about Yang is that he's one of two Democratic candidates, the other being Bernie Sanders, that 10% or more of Trump supporters said they'd be willing to vote for. Fuck off, spy. Yang's motto, if you can call it, is not left, not right, but forward. And the fact that when you look at the comment section of any videos he's in, you'll often see somebody saying, oh, I voted for Trump, but I'm gonna switch to Democrat just so I can vote for Yang, or I'm a Republican, but I really like this guy. He has the sort of charisma and ideas needed to win over people who were originally very infatuated by Trump, or lifelong Republicans who never thought about switching sides. And I'll get to that a little bit more later. So, universal basic income has already been implemented in a very limited manner in the United States. In Alaska, they get $1,000 to $2,000 a year as opposed to $1,000 a month. And it is something that has been supported throughout U.S. history. Thomas Paine, one of the founding fathers, wanted for there to be a universal basic income implemented. Everybody talks about the I Have a Dream Martin Luther King, but after he made that speech in the years following leading up to his death, he was focused hard on economics, and one of his proposals was, surprise surprise, a universal basic income. It's an idea that has been here and there throughout American history, In fact, it was even very popular in I think like the 60s or 70s, but never quite got off the ground. Andrew Yang seems like the politician who would be able to implement it. Now, one of the questions is, why would or should these companies adhere to this value-added tax? Well, for one, Amazon is a trillion... Hold on. Where is he? Where are you, boy? Here. Oh. I'm a bit drunk right now, so I hope that got it. Anyways, Amazon is a trillion-dollar company. But do you know how much it paid in taxes over the years? Like the last 3 or 4 years? I'll let you guess while I'm still muting people. And the answer is zero. $0 in federal taxes. A trillion-dollar company that operates primarily in the United States has paid literally nothing back to the American people. If your community can't afford to fix a pothole, if you wonder why governments don't implement a universal healthcare system citing costs, one of the reasons for it is because large companies like Amazon, Google, Facebook, they don't pay taxes. They have an entire fucking army of accountants dedicated to avoiding giving Uncle Sam his dues, and all of that burden then falls on the backs of the American people. Is it ludicrous? Absolutely fucking yes. It's absurd that we've gotten to this point where these companies could make more than any previous fucking company in the world. They make the East India Trading Company look like a fucking child's lemonade stand on the corner. Don't pay anything in taxes, and that's going to continue because basically our current politicians are a bunch of fucking hungry sluts for corporate money. A corporatist says jump, these politicians ask how high. And that's just not going to change anytime soon, I'm afraid. Especially when it's Republicans controlling the government who are so attached to these corporations it looks like the fucking human centipede. So value-added tax will be a way for these corporations to have to pay their dues and not be able to as easily wiggle out of it. And that's pretty fucking important, universal basic income aside. I'm going to bail. Don't want to overextend, especially as a medic. So that's why these companies should be paying for it, because they aren't paying for anything as of now. But what would a universal basic income do to help? Well, let's examine the different class structures in the United States, from the lowest rungs of the ladder to the highest. If you're literally homeless, if you don't have a fucking penny to your name, $1,000 a month will be heaven sent. You'll be able to easily afford food, you'll be able to easily afford some cheap motel. And when you have that, when you have at least a roof over your head, you can start picking yourself back up again. Or start picking yourself up for the first time if that was a sort of life you've always lived, as unfortunate as that is. Perhaps you can then go to the library and use their computers to apply for a job online, because every fucking place requires you to apply online. And let's say you get a job. Let's say you get a job as a dishwasher in a restaurant. Now, on top of that $1,000 a month, you're also going to get the salary from your dishwashing job, which isn't much, but it is more than you got when you only had the freedom dividend, and it's a hell of a lot more than you had when you were literally homeless. And that homeless person, maybe would seize the opportunity, realize this is the ultimate chance to set my life right, to finally be a part of the American dream. He's gonna give it his fucking all. And so he works hard, he cleans those dishes like a boss. And he gets some more money, maybe he gets a pay raise, or maybe he even works his way up in the food chain in the restaurant. Maybe he becomes a food prep, and then a line cook, and hell, maybe even becomes a full-blown chef. Or maybe he decides, the food industry isn't really where I want to go in life. I'm gonna search for another job. And after a while, with the freedom dividend and his actual salary, he'll be in a financially secure enough position to start looking for other jobs. And having finally had a job, he'll be a lot more hireable in the eyes of employers. Oh, what's your experience? A year or two in the kitchen washing dishes? Well, that's literally better than nothing. Or perhaps he could seek some sort of education, go to a community college, and be able to take some limited classes that'll give him the necessary skills and prerequisites for a certain career. He could even, rise up and become the middle class, or maybe getting a little bit of money is just a step he needs to write a best-selling novel and become a fucking millionaire. After all, that's quite literally what happened to J.K. Rowling. So you have a guy who went from being literally homeless to potentially having a very stable, financially secure life. All because he started getting $1,000 a month. That already should justify the freedom dividend, but let's move up in the hierarchy. Now let's examine the lower class. Let's say a college student who has a lot of student loan debts. He's a millennial, so of course he's not getting paid anything. And yeah, he has a roof over his head, but how long is a question. Oh fuck, I thought I could do it. 1 out of 2 ain't bad. Well, $1,000 a month, he can be now rest assured that those bills will be paid. Because believe it or not, financial distress, what is it Trump called it, economic anxiety, is a huge, has a huge impact on how people think and behave. Like, if you're stressed out, studies have shown you lose IQ points. You actually become dumber. Extreme stress can even shrink your brain by a small but non-negligible amount. If you ever wonder why people seem dumber, people seem more narcissistic, like the worst of humanity has come out in this current day and age, well, one of the big factors of that is so many people are stressed about economics. The majority of Americans can't handle an unexpected $500 bill. A huge swath of the population lives paycheck to paycheck. They're one missed paycheck from being that homeless guy I talked about earlier. No fucking wonder everything seems like it sucks so much ass. $1,000 a month, they don't have to worry about being able to pay their bills on time, or paying their mortgage or their taxes, because now they have some guaranteed income that can be put toward that. And when they're in a more financially secure position, they'll be able to do better at their jobs, they'll be able to feel safe enough to start families, they'll be, financially secure enough to maybe open up their own businesses, to pursue their passions, to overall live a better life.
Mission begins in 60 seconds.
Now, Bernie Sanders proposes that we should forgive all student loan debts, which is in the trillions now, and I ain't against that idea. I think it's a fair and good idea, considering that colleges have gone way too fucking excited with being expensive, despite not being that much better than they used to be. However, if Bernie Sanders doesn't win, I think that $1,000 a month will very much help people be able to pay off these debts. They won't be saddled by it. It won't follow them to the grave. The fact that people can go into such ridiculous debts, seeking an education, seeking to be part of the American dream, is ludicrous.
3, 2,
And you may have read many articles about how millennials are killing this or that industry. Millennials are killing the golf industry, millennials are killing this and that restaurant, millennials are killing the napkin industry, or the bar soap industry, or what the fuck ever. And do you know why millennials are killing all these industries? Well shot, Sniper. The reason for it is they don't have any fucking money. Inflation has increased over the decades. Wages have not. People argue we need a $15 minimum wage, but that's even lower still than the equivalent wage of people in the 1970s. $6 an hour in the 1970s was equivalent to $18 an hour in 2019. And there's still a huge pushback, many of which from conservatives and libertarians who don't seem to understand the most foundational fact of economics. If you don't have any money, you can't buy anything. And millennials are living in like one of the shittiest economic situations to ever straddle a generation. You have to go back to the Great Depression to find people who are in a bigger shithole than the current millennials. And it's not because millennials are lazy or entitled. Millennials work harder than any previous fucking generation. The greatest generation? Fucking peanuts. Millennials often take 2 or 3 jobs just to barely scrape by, if even that. Something's gotta change, otherwise an entire generation of Americans, and by extension the country itself, is gonna falter and fall and fucking disappear. Like suicide rates, depression, drug overdoses, just the average life expectancy has declined over the last 3 years, something that hasn't happened since a goddamn Spanish flu in like 1818, or not 1818, 1918. You have to go back over 100 fucking years to find life expectancy declining. And unfortunately, as of now, we don't have an FDR to present a New Deal. We instead have the worst fucking president this country has ever seen. A man who encompasses every negative quality a person could have. Every possible thing that should discount someone from holding a leadership position, Trump personifies. So yeah, the lower class is not doing well, and the lower class is composed by a large amount by young people in their like mid-19 hundreds, the chances for a child to be more successful than his or her parents was at like 94%. Now it's at 50, and it's only going to go down further if current trends continue. $1,000 a month. Now millennials can pay off their debts. Now they don't have to worry about their bills. Now their cheap-ass bosses paying minimum wage and arguing against raising it aren't the only sources of income. They can contribute to the economy. They can make the economy stronger by being able to purchase frivolities rather than the basic necessities. Because listen, you fucking boomers, if it was between food, rent, and fucking napkins and golf courses, millennials are gonna choose food and rent. Industries will fucking die because people keep getting greedy unless we implement a new fucking system. Is it any goddamn wonder why capitalism is viewed so poorly by younger generations? Gee, I can't fucking imagine why so many millennials and even zoomers are flirting with communism. So what about the ever-dwindling middle class? What about the fading American dream? Well, $1,000 a month will still be quite grand. If you had a vacation in mind, you can now very easily afford it. Save up just a little bit, and you have it no problem. You can maybe afford a bigger house, a better car, to send your kids to college without any worry. Every positive aspect about being the middle class, about having a roof over your head and not being scared that by the next paycheck that won't be the case anymore, will just be practically doubled. And there'll be a more of a middle class because giving people more money will increase social mobility and economic mobility. So then what about the upper classes? What about the rich? Well, truth be told, $1,000 a month isn't gonna mean much to them. Bill Gates isn't gonna be jumping for joy and thanking the stars because $1,000 has been deposited in his bank check. This whole system is essentially trickle-up economics. Not the shitty trickle-down economic system that governments have been adhering to for the longest time, where the richest are given all these handouts and the poorest basically get nothing. It's trickle-up. The poorest will benefit the most, the middle class will benefit a little, the upper class, not really much at all, to be honest. But everyone is still going to get the same amount. And I think that's one of the big reasons why even conservatives and Republicans are sort of friendly to this idea, at least a sizable portion of them. It's because it's not rooted in identity politics or some kind of progressive stack. It's not like reparations where only a handful of people get a bunch of money for crimes committed by ancestors that aren't even alive, to people who aren't even alive. It's universal. It doesn't disclude you for being white or male or straight, which, let's face it, is one of the most discluded groups of people in modern liberal politics. Like, if you're a guy and you complain about any issue men face, the turbo feminists on the left will just say boo-hoo, male tears, fuck you, shitlord, and just ignore it. Andrew Yang doesn't play identity politics. Andrew Yang has to be basically coerced into a subject related to identity politics to even begin to skirt on it. So I think that's one of the big reasons why, conservatives, or some of them, do genuinely like Andrew Yang. It's because he's very different from the rest of the left. which Andrew Yang is most certainly a leftist. He is interested in gay rights. He is interested in universal health care. He wants there to be better education for people. He wants to help the poor. Basically, all the things that the right wing of the US government has been opposing for so long, Andrew Yang is in favor of it, so you can't say he's like some libertarian, a wolf in sheep's clothing, or a conservative trying to steal liberal votes. Fact of the matter is, a universal basic income is like the last leg for capitalism to stand on. Because this current system has failed an entire generation, and it's going to continue to do so. And the only thing that's going to keep people from continuing to flirt with communism and socialism is... fuck off. Is if we refine capitalism so it doesn't start at zero. Now, I myself consider myself to be a democratic socialist. Think FDR, you know, the guy who was so popular he got re-elected 4 fucking times. Well, 3 times technically. He was elected 4 times. In fact, term limits exist because of him. So just tell anyone that when they complain about Americans and socialism and all that shit. However, even though that should align me more with Bernie Sanders, which let me state right now, I actually like Bernie Sanders and think he would be an excellent president, he is number 2 on my list because I don't think Bernie Sanders has the adequate solution to the problem of automation. His solution is for there to be a federal jobs guarantee, where even if automation takes over your job, you can find employment in the government sector. And the reason I don't like this is, first of all, it really sounds like the kind of solution a science fiction author would make when crafting a shitty cyberpunk dystopia. He argues that it's a good idea because people seek out work for meaning. People want to do something, they want to contribute to society, they want to be more than a lazy bastard sitting on the couch playing video games. People don't want to be Darkside Phil, let's just say that. The problem is, the work that the government can provide isn't necessarily going to be fulfilling or meaningful. People seek employment for meaning, sure. Hold on. People seek employment for meaning, sure, but most employment opportunities don't give you that meaning. A lot of people find zero existential or philosophical, emotional, spiritual, whatever benefit to their work. A lot of people outright wish they could just quit their job. In his book, The War on Normal People, Andrew Yang quoted a guy who I will paraphrase and possibly mangle here, where he said, if being a cashier was a video game, it would be considered the worst game of all time. But because it's a job, politicians look at it and say, it's dignified, it's important, it provides purpose. But the guy standing around for, and this is my words, but the guy standing around for hours on end, swiping food items over a scanner and tacking away on a fucking cash register while the person fumbles around with their debit card, and maybe they're stuck with a soccer mom who demands to see their manager because she doesn't understand how coupons work. None of that's meaningful. None of that provides any purpose to their life. They would rather do so many other fucking things, including sitting around and being a lazy bum. And that's what these government jobs are going to be. It's just going to be busy work for people who were out of the job due to a system of economics that just doesn't fucking meet the requirements for improved technology. Wow, dumbass, don't fucking attack the sentry or anything. Brilliant strategy demo. Fucking brilliant. And with all those new government jobs is going to come a whole lot of bureaucracy. Already the government is basically mired by copious amounts of bureaucracy, and the whole idea is just going to make it worse. And what if you suck at the job? What if you're just terrible at it? Would you be fired and have to file for a new government job? Giving people $1,000 a month will make new jobs, and it'll allow them to choose their own path. I think that's a lot better, more meaningful for the American people than a bunch more government jobs. And you know what? Maybe some of those people will get government jobs, but they might choose more meaningful ones. They might go and become part of the FBI. Some of them will get better education and become part of NASA. Who fucking knows? But it's a lot more interesting. It's a lot just better overall than saddling people with busy work. Now, I don't think all of Andrew Yang's ideas are perfect. In fact, his own idea of the freedom dividend, he himself states in his book, isn't enough to live a prosperous life. It's enough to just barely get by, if even that. So you can't just stop working and live off of Yang books. Oh, sorry, Spy. Sorry. However, right now, artificial intelligence can do repetitive, simple tasks far better than a human being can. This is called soft AI. But what will happen when we develop hard AI, or artificial general intelligence? AI that is able to learn quickly, that is able to adapt, that is able to be creative. At that point, what industry would remain? Alright, I switched maps because it doesn't seem like the other game was going to turn out well. But what industry would survive artificial general intelligence? Well, I guess what I'm asking is, what is Yang's long-term solution? Because I worry that a freedom dividend, even if it increases to match inflation, will make society stagnant, where things, oh, you know, robots are taking over more jobs than humans can possibly make. Oh, whatever, you know, we'll just make more jobs or something, you know, just a non-fucking solution to this ever-growing problem of a magnitude not previously experienced. And I guess that may not necessarily be relevant to Andrew Yang, since we don't really know when an artificial general intelligence would be developed. Ray Kurzweil thinks it's 2045, but even with that estimate, even if Yang not only gets a presidency but also wins the next election, he's not going to have any real presidential impact on the future. But it is still something to consider and think about, because you gotta think ahead. We've seen what happens when you don't think ahead. We've seen, well, let's just not raise the minimum wage even though inflation is increasing, because derp-de-doo, I'm greedy and I want even more money than I have already. Fuck you, I got mine. So that's something I'd like to see him answer. Another thing I'd like to know is, assuming he doesn't win the presidency, which is very much a possibility, nothing's guaranteed. A lot of people were under the assumption that there's no possible way Trump could win, and surprise, surprise, he's President 45, as shitty as it is. So, assuming Andrew Yang doesn't win, I'd like to know what he would do moving forward, because implementing a universal basic income is important, and should be pursued by him even if he isn't in the Oval Office. I at least hope he would take an interest in touche, Pyro, touche, in trying to pursue it even if he doesn't win.
Attention.
One thing I would be interested in knowing is his thoughts and opinions on transhumanism, because he talks a lot about universal basic income, which is a topic that does tend to come up in transhumanist circles, but he never actually mentioned transhumanism, at least not to my knowledge or recollection, and I have tried to do the research on it. Is he concerned about the fact that humanity is ever more starting to integrate itself with machinery? Yeah, this is what I'd like to do on this map, just camp here and wait for some poor bastard to go over there. Does he see this as a threat to his policies? Is he concerned that... Yeah, here. That if people augment themselves to catch up to machines, that... Wow, that's fucking stupid. I am terrible at video games. That if people augment themselves to catch up to machines, that this whole general societal structure where there's no UBI implemented will continue on because people can now compete and work far harder for far less. There's no incentive to implement anything better. I'd be interested in knowing, because that's like actually a big premise of the book I wrote. It's like the main argument against transhumanism I presented. Oh, that's... Alright, going medic. The entire genre of cyberpunk exists to ask a question. What if technology increased exponentially, but society continued to stagnate? Well, now we don't need Gibson to answer that. We have society itself to show us what happens, and it's economic disparity. We currently live in the shittiest cyberpunk setting, not because it's the most oppressive or the most heavily regimented or anything like that, because it's the most boring one. There's no cool transhumanist gadgets, there's no, cyberspace hacking, there's no virtual reality wonderlands or, all-imposing mega corporations or anything like that. There's our fucking corporate masters being sassy with each other on Twitter. I don't know if I'll survive. Run! Oh, there we go. He fucking misses me? Really? That's a world we live in now. where our data is worth billions, but we don't receive a cent of it, where we're being watched by government and corporations alike without our consent, where wages have stagnated but inflation increased, where the rich get ever richer and the poor ever poorer, where technology increases but society doesn't. We are in a cyberpunk dystopia, and if we are to get out of it, we need bold new ideas like the ones Andrew Yang are presenting. And that's why I'm in full support of him. Unless something changes, we're just gonna keep going further and further downhill, beyond the record high suicide rates, beyond the record high drug overdoses, beyond the lowered life expectancy. I can't even fucking speak right now. You know, we don't live as many fucking years. It's an awful goddamn situation, and not one that should happen to the American people. So I do hope Andrew Yang wins. I really do, and I'll be willing to cast my vote for him in the Democratic primaries, and if he wins, I'll be damn happy to vote for him in the general election. It won't be like Hillary Clinton where I had to hold my nose. But until that day comes, I hope you enjoyed the video, that I gave you something to think about and otherwise entertained you. And also, you know, if you like this idea of me talking about different subjects, both controversial and not, oh fuck you, dude, over some TF2 gameplay, let me know, or even suggest a topic, because as you've seen, I can ramble at length about something. It's like my own little podcast. Maybe Andrew Yang will join it, since he's already been on so many other podcasts. Anyways, take care.